All right. If everything is working, we should be live. So I sent out a notification. So just gonna wait for about a minute or two to get started, and we should be good to go. As usual, if anything's wrong with the stream, please just let me know over on the side. I've got the chat window going, and then other than that, yeah, I'm sure we can get started. Cool. I'm gonna mute everything here because otherwise I hear myself like 5 times. Cool. Let's get this party started. So as the last 2 years, I'm gonna try and do the all the letters in the 36 days of type, and I figured it would be nice to start it off by doing the first one that needs to be posted live here on YouTube. So cool. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to try and comment a little bit on what I'm doing during the stream, although I'm not sure how this is going to work because I've never really made anything live on stream before. So we'll just see how it goes, I guess. All right. So obviously we're going to have to start with a letter. And the text tool in Blender is decent enough and the standard font is sort of all right. I'm not going to worry about the font too much for this one. I just want to get started, get going. I have a bit of an idea of what I want to do, but it might change into something completely different, so we'll just see. Hello everyone coming in, by the way, in the stream. All right. Oh, I'll enable screencast keys as well for the people that like that. And it should be enabled. So let's see. All right, cool. So I'm going to convert this to a mesh, and then I'm going to throw out some of these front faces. And as usual, I think I might have said this before, if you have any questions, just shout and I'll try and answer them as I'm working. So I like to align stuff to my axes here. You might have noticed this a lot before. It makes it a lot easier to work with. I don't know if I'm gonna align this to the front here. Maybe I should. Should have kept an eye on how big that extrude was. There we go. Now at least I know if I create stuff on the center point, it's going to be pretty much aligned with the front. So what am I going to try and do? Let's see. The fun thing about this challenge is just all about experimenting. At least that's how I tackle it and look at it. I don't really see the point in trying to go in with a bunch of preconceived notions, because I'm just going to get upset that I didn't do it. Oh yeah, this is on the z-axis because I need to apply the rotation first because I rotated it when I started the text. And we can actually set this to 0. There we go. At least now I know it's 25 Blender units long, which will make my life a lot easier. All right, so let's get this party started to see what we can do, huh? Yes, it is an everyday challenge. I don't know if I don't think I'm going to stream every day because I've got stuff to do, unfortunately. But usually the way I approach it, and I'll show those later on, is I have a couple of them already made up front. So the last day or two, I made the B, C, and D already. And the reason for that is if I get some work that comes in the next couple of days, I can't always guarantee that I'll have time to work on them. So I want to make sure that I have a few of them done already. So I have a little bit of a sort of a buffer in case something goes wrong. So the fun thing, one of the fun things about this actually is that it's set. The image has to be 1280 by 1280, and it makes it a lot easier when you don't have to think about your subject, when you know exactly what it's going to be, and you can just, you know, experiment away, have fun with it. So let's see, what do I want to do here? Let's subdivide this a couple of times. Make sure they're square-ish at least. 19. Keep it similar. I don't know how many of those are. Need to redo that for a sec. 6 cuts should be fine. And again, I'm just generating a bunch of geometry that I can use for displacement and other things. It's always nice to have a mesh that's somewhat divided up in quads, especially if you're going to use things like modifiers or whatever to try and do cool stuff with it. And like I said, this might not even pan out at all, and I might have to redo it, but we'll see. All right, so it's time to add a subdivision modifier. But if everything goes well, at least I should have on Instagram one each day for the next 36 days. So the first one is going to be posted tomorrow, so I'm a day early, but like I said, I like to have a bit of a buffer in case it gets a little crazy. Let's actually flatten that out. There we go. I'll give us something to work with. So I love distorted noise, especially this, no, not these, but the cell noises. They give some really cool sort of tech patterns, if that's what you want to call them, as you can see. And again, you know, if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but the whole thing with this challenge for me is that I try to do them fairly quickly, not lose too much time. Just get a cool idea out, work it out, and yeah, just have fun with it. There we go. So now we've got this and that going on. Let's see, what else do I want to do? Actually, switch to vertices. Oh crap! Didn't realize I was still in the object. So let's separate that out. Merge them together at the center. And then I'm just gonna quickly draw out the shape of an A. There we go. And then subdivide this one. Slide it over and extrude it out. So this one's at 0, and this one can be at 0 as well. I've used JS placement before, it's nice. But I like to do as much stuff as I can inside of Blender just to make it a little bit easier. But it's cool, it's a good tool, like it's nice, it works well for what it does. So I'm just gonna throw on a skin modifier here. And skin modifier is interesting because you can create like a nice wireframe from it. And let's see what happens if I subdivide that a bit. There we go, that's nice. So what I want to do as the idea is sort of forming, oh, I have to shade it smooth, here. There we go. I want to get this one light source in the form of an A in the back here, and then have it reflect off the thing that I'm making, just to give it sort of an interesting look. We'll see. So I get into rendering stuff fairly quickly, just because it's easier. I like to have sort of a final image to look at. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to turn off the environment, and let's call this one mesh. There we go, light. And we're going to give that a new emission shader. And so far, it's not really that interesting just yet. But at least we've got a scene set up now. We can start doing stuff. So let's see what happens when we start shading this. And actually, I want to turn the specular up and the roughness down. And this is what I was talking about. Once you get sort of these technical patterns, and you get some nice reflections going, you get some super interesting results. So again, with this A selected, I can go down here and in the cycle settings, turn off camera visibility. Now the only thing that's still missing is sort of the middle, but we'll see how we can get to a point where that's actually clearer. Am I planning to stream more of the letters or just the start? It really depends. If I have time, I'd be more than happy to stream other ones. I'm going to try to, but I don't really want to promise anything I can't make happen, because it's been really busy lately with client work and things, and I need to be able to fit it all in. But yeah, just bug me on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, and just tell me to stream things, and I'll try and stream as much as I can. So let's see, let's get back into the 3D view. I'm just going to collapse this for a sec, because I want to make this a little bit more intricate, more interesting. So what am I going to do? Let's see if I can add a second layer on top of this. What am I looking for? Solidify, there we go. And rather than filling the rim, I just want to add a second layer. Make sure even thickness is set up. Just mess with it a little bit. Go up further a little bit even. Alright, now the reason I'm setting this up is I'm going to start taking parts out of the mesh, and I want to layer as much as I can to get extra stuff. So someone asks, do I have filmic color management on by default? Yes, actually I do. And I even use the high contrast look by default, because I feel it gives a really, really nice look. But I use the others still. Sometimes I'll just try things out, see what happens when I just mess with them. So, okay. And now this trick really has been one of my favorite things lately. I've been using it for a while, but sort of on and off. And I don't know, I did an image recently which used a lot of this technique over and over again. So, and if we have time today, I'll try and open that up so you can have a look at it. But it's quite slow, so it really depends on how quickly this goes. So I'm setting all this up basically so I can have a texture drive the vertex group that I just made. There's a quick tip on the YouTube channel for people that want to get into it. So again, distorted noise. I'm all about that cell noise. I love it. It gives some really cool results. And the nice thing is, now that we've set that up, I'm just going to call this mask.noise. What you'll see is that if I collapse these down and we'll add a mask, for example, mask, there we go. We can now use that vertex group, and it'll actually be using that pattern to take stuff out of the mesh, which makes it really, really cool and interesting to work with. Now, again, I'm going to split this up. At this point, I definitely want to be looking at my rendered view as much as I can. because it's going to make a huge difference. So maybe we went a little overboard, and we can fix that. But the thing that I like about it the most is I can just put in the number, and this takes a while because we've got a render preview going. But I can just look at it and try things, and maybe lower the contrast a little bit, so we still have enough to go on. There we go, that looks pretty cool. Let's see if we can add more things to that. And maybe what I can do is array this one out. Where are we? Ease up on the subsurf because we're not actually seeing it. So we just want, pardon me, an inkling of the shape. Doesn't need to be like super high poly. What we can do here is brighten it up a little bit, give it some more reflections. Maybe that's too much, so what I can do is space them out a little bit more. Bring down the count. And all I want to do is just light this up, and we're still having a bit of an issue with the middle shape here. So it sort of looks like an A, but not really, even though, you know, I'm pretty happy with it so far. Now, because I've already set this up, the cool thing is this vertex group can be used for other stuff as well. So if I add a smooth modifier now, where are we? Smooth. Add in that mask, vertex group, and it's not really doing anything for now, but there's this little trick I want to show you guys that I've been using a lot. I've been on a very interesting project lately, and I've been really diving into a lot of this, so it's been a lot of fun. So first thing I'm going to do is actually duplicate this, because I'm going to apply some of these modifiers and hide this one. And I've noticed as well that even though the object is hidden, it can really help with Blender's performance to turn off the modifiers of the hidden object. So I want to be able to keep this subsurf procedural. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it above. Actually, no. No, the subsurf is fine. Sorry, it's solidify. I want to keep procedural. So I'm going to apply this. And the reason I'm going to apply this is now I can select all those edges, hit Control E, and where are we? What am I trying to do? And edge split them. So the effect that the smooth will now have on it is that, as you can see, it'll use the map to sort of there we go. Come on. Sort of smooth out some parts, and the cool thing is if you edge split all of these, you get insane amounts of detail, because smoothing a single polygon generally just shrinks it down a little bit, which is cool because, you know, like I said, I didn't have to do much, and I get all of this extra detail for free, and it makes things look really interesting. There we go. So I'm already really liking this. I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to go this quick. I thought it was going to be messing around a lot more. So, well, excuse me. Let's see if I add another solidify into the mix. So have I seen an add-on called Growth Nodes? It's procedural displacement, much more interesting than one built into Blender. Yeah, actually it layers displacement. It does some really interesting stuff. I've played around with it a little bit, but I haven't gotten any interesting results from it just yet. Like, it's able to do cool stuff, but I don't know, maybe I'll just a quick interlude. I'll be able to show it. Is it still in here? I was trying things, but it wasn't really. Let's see. Yeah, so I still need to get the hang of it a little bit. And of course, DJV view is going to not work on stream. Typical. I don't think the second one did anything. Really not going to do anything? What's going on? Oh, there we are. So this is what I was getting from it. It's cool, but yeah, I still need to get used to it and do stuff. But you can do some cool stuff, like really organic looking weird things. Let's see. Okay, so now that there's 2 solidifies on it, you can see there's multiple layers, and generally to make it work correctly, you want a thickness of about 75% to a half of the previous one. And it's getting really slow now. And that's a little over the top. Minus 0.05. There we go, just add that little bit extra. The things I'm not liking are these weird things sticking out. But again, that's more to do with the displacement rather than anything else. So if I bring that down just a touch. And it'll be a little bit less over the top, but again, I think it's time to start looking at the render and see what we can get from there. And it's taken a while to render. So even though we're only at about 500,000 faces, which should be fine for cycles, obviously it's not that much, it's still taking a while to render because it has to calculate all the modifiers. So usually once I'm happy with them, I'll start converting them to a mesh after I copy them. But I just want to be sure. Maybe bump the displace back up. That actually looks cool. Come on, it's taking a while. It's alright, I think it's like somewhere in between there. So let's try 0.175. Come on. Alright. Even the middle one is somewhat decent, but what I'm going to try to do is maybe add a single light source in the back for it. So I'm going to set my cursor to selected so I can create a point lamp just to have a little accent of the shape. So glad this is an April Fool's joke. Thank you. I logged into YouTube today and I saw all the April Fool's jokes and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't realize this would probably be a really bad time to do a stream because nobody would take it seriously. So thank you all for being here. Okay. Let's see. I feel like something might be missing. Let's play with the shading a bit. Let's bring the roughness up. Not really my jam. And transmission does interesting things. Maybe it might be worth having another part just encasing it. So I'm gonna grab that one and maybe just increase this one a little bit first. Oop, let's see. Let's grab these. Come on. And again, I'm just trying stuff. I don't really have an idea of where I want to go. It's just messing with it. Oh crap, that's not gonna work. No, I was hoping that would work, but it's not going to. It's the best way to scale this down now. I guess just to grab the whole bottom part here. And I'm sure there's way faster ways of selecting this. That'll do. It'll be alright. It's not that big a deal. I'm just trying it anyway. If it sucks, I can throw it out. And if it's good, I can clean it up after if I need to. Alright, so let's still have the same material. So let's throw that out and put in a new material. Excuse me again. And see what we can do with it. So, the principled shader is awesome. Now if you're wondering why this is like a little wider and stuff, I'm using a Blender daily build just because the displacement in the daily builds is absolutely amazing. It's gotten a lot better. It's not to say it was bad before, it's just been heavily improved, and you've got like real-time viewport previews and stuff. So if you have a chance to check it out, it's totally worth it. So what happens if I set this to metallic? And we're just gonna get insane amounts of reflection, but I think that's a little too much. I don't know, I kind of like it the way it is. It's got something mysterious about it. Yeah, I'll leave that for now. What happens if we just render it out so you can see it in the full view? Wouldn't pressing G twice allow you to move faces furthest along the line? Probably. I still don't know every single Blender shortcut. I think it's physically impossible to know, so I can try it next time if I remember. Although a little minimalist, it's kind of nice. I like it. It has some interesting touches to it. I wonder if I can add some more. Okay, so looking at this, I know I've got something decent I can work with. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to save it first of all. 36 days type. Type 18E. And I'm not really happy with, well, actually I'm happy with it, but I wanna try something else. So let's see. I have this prism shader that I bought on the Blender market, which is awesome. But the problem is I want to share these files afterwards. So I'm gonna use my own dispersion shader, which is just terrible, which I created before. But yeah, if you need something like a prism shader, then I would definitely recommend the one that is available on the Blender market, because this one, if you would grab it, I think I've used it in other files as well that are on the cloud or on my Instagram account or whatever. This is a hack. It's just a major hack, and it sort of works, but it's really slow and noisy, so I wouldn't recommend using this. But I'm using it just so I'm able to share some of this stuff. So I like the RGB-ness of it here. See if the reflection helps a lot or not. And actually, I'm going to set the start resolution higher. Let's set it to 420 just for shits and giggles. What do I think about Eevee? Do you think he'll take advantage of it because of my peculiar way of working? Well, modifiers don't work in the Blender 2.8 builds at the moment, so that's the reason I haven't played around with it all that much. The moment they work, I'm going to use it quite a lot, I think. It's cool. I think for like simpler minimalistic things and stuff with a lot of reflections even, though I'm not sure, it might be quite useful. For like super complex scenes, you know, it might or might not be. We'll see. But it's a good toolkit to have. I'm excited to see what I can do with it, and you know, development seems to be going pretty rapidly. But at the moment, it's not usable yet for the way I do stuff. So I'm sort of holding off and waiting, I guess, impatiently. But yeah, but it's interesting. I think it's going to be a cool way of trying stuff out. Just being able to see your scene sort of previewed before you render it might be great to see it as well. All right, so this is cool, but I don't know. Is it adding to it? That's the question. So I really like the way this looked, but I don't know. It's nice. It's cool. All right, so let's work on our depth of field and other things. So I depth of field in a lot of cases, and I keep calling it depth of field, and it isn't. It kind of is and it isn't. Like if you have a wide depth of field, it means actually things aren't as blurry. So now I'm working with a shallow one. But in this case, because I have all this really tiny detail, I don't feel like it's actually adding to it. So, sorry, I'm having a really rough time with my voice here. I'm just gonna have a drink. So in this case, I don't really feel like it's like it maybe is a something that's adding to it. Like if I turn it off, it's nice that you have all this cool glitchy stuff, and I think I'm just gonna glitch the hell out of it. I don't know. I've always liked glitchy things, so well, this looks pretty decent already. I'm wondering if I show the text, if it's worth it. Cycle settings. No, that's really not adding to it. All right, so let's try one more thing. This is getting real slow now, but oh well. Let's make it even slower. I'm gonna duplicate this on the y-axis, and because I knew I made it 25 deep, I can easily do that. So it's something I do a lot in Blender. I use whole units, so that way when you're trying things out, I can really easily remember how long or wide or tall your object is. So if you need to duplicate stuff, it makes it a lot easier. So now it's really chugging because we're working with, what is it? A million faces. It should be okay for the most part, but it is getting a little on the slow side. But I just wanted more depth just to see what happens. And again, we'll just wait for it to render. Oh, hey, Chris. Just use some powerful computers and crowd render instead of Eevee. Yeah, crowd render's been awesome to test. It's been a lot of fun. If you haven't, if people don't know about it, check it out. Will I be live streaming every character? No, unfortunately not. That would be too much of a fuss, I think. And I already have 3 done. I have B, C, and D already done, which I'll show after as well. The thing is, with my schedule, I'm not able to do them in a linear fashion every day. I have to have a buffer in case something goes wrong, or you know, clients are asking for crazy things, which they do because, you know, they're clients. That's what they do. So I'm going to play with the shader a little bit more, and I think I might actually get into compositing fairly soon because I'm very happy with how this is turning out. There we go. The refraction roughness is giving us even more RGB, and that's what I like. That's cool. Let's go back to the text. The emission strength is only set to 1, so let's see if we boost it, then we can get some really cool highlights going. Or if you change the color, maybe colorize it a little bit. That's awesome. Blue was decent. That's pretty cool too. See, sometimes you're just faced with hard choices. I like that one. I like where that's going. There we go. This gives us sort of a nice balance of colors, and we can still boost that in the compositing stage. All right, that's dope. Let's see. Where's my camera? So my limits are fine. Now I just need to set the mist so I can do other cool things. Oh, there we go. I usually try to set the mist up so that it's just behind the end of my scene. That way you get a linear sort of black to white gradient from front to back, which is really nice. You can do some interesting things with it. So do I know the features that have been added to Blender 2.79.4? So they're adding a bunch of stuff. Cycle specifically, displacement has been revamped. It now also includes support for vector displacement. It does real-time changes in your viewport when you have a rendered view, which is awesome. The bevel node has been added. There's a principled volume shader. There's been changes to some of the modifiers, like I believe the mirror modifier now has an axis in it, which you can define. So you can do more without having to add a control object. There's all a bunch of stuff going on. Those are just off the top of my head, and I'm sure I've missed quite a few even. It's worth checking it out every now and again. You know, if you're doing production work, I do production work in the daily build sometimes if I need some of the features, but I wouldn't recommend it because you can get some very weird behavior, unfortunately. But it's worth checking out what's coming because for personal work, you know, it can be nice to try things. But the displacement has been really awesome. I believe out of core rendering has been working for CUDA as well. So you can now add your CPU for rendering too when you're rendering on CUDA. So I can show you in the user preferences, for example, I now get not only my cards, so this is my display card, and these are the 3 cards I'm rendering on right now, but I also get the my processor, which is cool because this is about as fast as one of the other cards. So basically you get a fifth, I get a 5th one for free here. And out of core means that you can render really high, you can render a bunch of stuff. How should I say this? Like before, if your scene didn't fit on the GPU, it just wouldn't render, and out of core means that some of the stuff can be offloaded to your RAM. So I've been rendering scenes that take up 30, 40 gigabytes in memory with displacement and things, and it just works. So oh, you meant is there a big gap in features between 2.793 and 2.794? Not really. It's I think you might be confusing them. So the one that's out now is 2.79b that recently got released, and that's the stable version. These point numbers don't mean, like, they probably mean something internally for the Blender people, but whenever you see a 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., it's usually it's an indication that you're working with a daily build because they're trying stuff. So vector displacement is RGB to XYZ on the material output node. Yeah, I'll show you one of the letters later that I did with vector displacement, and you can see exactly how that works. You're able to do stuff like overhanging displacement. So normally, I don't know how visible this is, but normally displacement just goes up. But with vector displacement, you could do displacement that, for example, does this. If you have the right map set up and things, it's really cool. So what are my suggestions for beginners and students, and how much time will it take to be at my level? Let me just hit render real quick and answer that question. So I think I've been doing CG stuff for a long time now, but don't let that discourage you, because in the last couple of years, just the amount of tutorials and things that are online are just crazy. Like, you can learn so much stuff without having to go to school for it. You can really learn pretty much anything you want online, which is awesome. So to get up my level, I don't really look at it as levels. Like, I've just been doing a lot of this stuff for quite some time. It really depends on what you want to do. I don't know. Don't give up, but I'm sure that if you really go hard at it for like a year, you can already get some really, really cool results. Just ask around for good tutorials, see what people are looking at, look at some of the styles that are being used nowadays. And, you know, I always tell people as well, if you have favorite artists, just try and emulate them a little bit. That stuff doesn't have to be posted, but if you can learn from creating something similar to some of the people that you like, then it's not time wasted. And honestly, there's this big myth about talent and things. Yeah, some people have sort of a natural, I guess, precursor to certain things, but I can't draw to save my life, for example. I'm really bad. Like, I have a brother that's that has a master's in art, and he just laughs at me every time I pick up a pencil. So don't feel like because you can't do one thing or the other that you won't be a good 3D artist, because you can be. So again, just keep trying stuff. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about if you're good or not good. All of that stuff is very relative, honestly. Do it for you. I think that's the biggest thing that I could give people to go on. If you like what you're doing, great. Don't try and do it for other people. So, am I on Linux? Yes, I am. I'm using Ubuntu 17.10 for the people that are interested. In the daily build, is micro displacement still experimental? I think it is, but my cycles is always set to experimental just because I want all the features. Sounds like what ZBrush can do with its displacement brushes. Yeah, basically vector displacement has been around for a long time. It's just, it was never really implemented into Blender, but it can do some really, really cool things. So even if you want to try it for yourself, download a daily build and just plug in the color of a noise texture into it, and you'll see that it sort of folds over on itself. It's really interesting. All right, cool. So I'm going to finish this one first, and then I'll get to showing the other three I've done so far. And what was I going to say? Yeah, show a recent artwork that people were asking about as well, where I use a similar technique. All right, so let's glitch the ever-living bejesus out of this. And there's still some noise in it, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. So there we go. So you get to see how I build glitch nodes and things. They're fairly easy to make, but they can be kind of a pain in the butt to set up. That's your problem, you dislike everything you create. Well, I'm sure if you work at it long enough, you'll make one thing that you really like and just go from there. I remember thinking I was really crap for the longest time, but honestly, all you can do is just keep making stuff. It's so, yeah, that's all you can do. I mean, you're gonna get better. There's no one trick to be good at it all of a sudden. So, yeah, people always want like the quick fix, but for art and things, unfortunately, that doesn't really work. So I'm going to set up some textures to use in compositing for a sec. So I'm gonna put in a grain node. So noise, and make this black and white. So I'm just setting these up preliminary. And then I can bring them in here, input texture. There we go. And I'll make a second one. I'm gonna call this glitch. And again, I'm gonna use the distorted noise set to cell noise, just so I can use it in the compositor as well. So let's see. Bring that in as well for use. No, not an image. I want a texture. Okay, so somebody says, started doing daily graphics around a year ago, and you can see the crazy process. Yeah, progress. Yeah, that's the thing. Like if you do it a lot, I don't do daily stuff because honestly, it just takes so much time, and I don't necessarily have the time to do so. Like mad respect to people who can do it every day and just makes the most insane stuff. I do mine 3 times a week, so Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. That way it's manageable because I've got a lot of other projects going on in between, and yeah, I mean, it's fun, it's cool. And you do really see it. Like if you go to my Instagram, for example, and you look at the first things I did, I think it's actually 36 days of type from 2 years ago or 3 years ago at this point. You'll see the difference in quality. It's really crazy how, you know, how much I've progressed myself in the last 2-3 years. So, you know, it's, everybody starts out not being that great. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll put it this way. I've had the same fears about that kind of thing, about I'll never be good enough and whatever. And honestly, if you love what you're doing, just keep doing that and enjoy it. All right, so I'm going to try and explain what I'm doing here before I get into it. So I like to glitch stuff out in, I have 2 sorts of glitches going on. Actually, I'll show you my desktop background. So I'm going to try and emulate something like this where it's like really distorted. I don't know if I'll go this far in the distortion, but still give you a good idea of what you can do with these setups. So the first one I'm going to do is give it some like RGB glitching because we want more colors, because more colors is just always better. So let's see. The question is, do I add my glows before or after? But I'll fix that after I've done glitching. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the R, G, and B channels. So what does that mean exactly? By being able to separate them out and combine them back in. So here you see the red channel, and then here you see the green channel, and here you see the blue channel. Now, if I just add these in again, then everything's fine. And because I've already got a lot of red and orange and yellow going on in here, I want to glitch out the green and blue channels. So by splitting them up and recombining them, what I can now do is add a displace node to the blue channel, or the green channel for that matter. And I'm just going to try and organize this stuff a little bit. So here we go. Displace. And what I can do is add this to the X scale. Now, this won't really do much initially because we're going from 0 to 1 in our color values here. And obviously that doesn't really do all that much because we're only shifting it 1 pixel. So generally what I'll do is, for example, add in a math node. Seeing that these are only black and white values, you can add a math node in, no problem. And I'm going to multiply that. And you'll see as soon as I start multiplying it, it'll actually start moving the green channel out. So positive values move it to the right, negative values will move it to the left. And you can already start seeing some really interesting stuff going on. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to be able to control how hard it glitches and how many glitches there are. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm just going to preview the map really quickly, is by adding in a color ramp node. And the color ramp will basically allow me to control how much glitching there is. So now all the black portions won't glitch and all of the white portions will. And the gray ones won't glitch as much, and the lighter ones will glitch as much. Will glitch more. So after I'm done explaining this, I'll answer some of the questions. So that way we can plug this in, and now you'll actually see that in action. And I need to unplug this bottom one here. So now you can see if I want more glitching, I can drag this over, and if I want it less, then you'll see it'll be a little bit less. Now, if I exaggerate this, then you'll see the effect more prominently. There we go, and you can see the glitches moving in, and because a lot of them are turning darker gray, then the glitching will become less and less. Now, the thing is, these are quite big, so what I can do is, let's see if I want to glitch more vertically, or horizontally rather. So put this in, and now you get sort of a compressed look, which is cool, but maybe we can bring it down even more. There we go, that's interesting. Maybe that's a little too much. Somewhere in between there. Cool. So now I can bring in how much I want it to glitch. And I'm going to bring the value down just a little bit because I don't want them to be that exaggerated. Now the only thing we're still missing is the glitching on the blue channel. But the cool thing is we can copy this one, and rather than having it set up, or I'm going to plug the blue into this, what I can do now is just add another math node and add in a multiply by -1. So now this is going to go in the other direction. So there we go. And now you can see exactly what's going on. And the cool thing is all I have to do is just use this one for controlling the amount of glitching, and use this one for controlling how many glitches there really are. So that makes it really cool to set up. There we go. Now, generally what I'll do for something like this as well is I don't want it to be that extreme, because RGB glitching is fun, but you want it to be a little bit more subtle. Maybe bring in a few more. And again, it's just a balance between these two parameters, because I'm going to go for the hard glitch, just like hard distortion a little bit further on. So one last thing I like to do is add in a blur filter, and just take just blur it like 1 or 2 pixels, and you'll see you'll get just some more like weirdness happening around the edges. And that's because now the black and white values are sort of going, instead of being a hard white to black line, it's sort of introducing some grayscale values in. And if I were to really overdo this, and you'll see exactly what's going on, the glitching will sort of glitch out a little bit less towards the edges, and you'll have sort of this smearing effect. But for these, I want them to be a little bit, have a little bit of a harder edge, so I'm not going to go overboard. And I'm going to answer some questions first, and do the second glitch box thingy. All right, so some anchor says, I've been stuck in a creative block for so long, a year or two. How'd you get your ideas for artwork? Honestly, if you're running out of ideas, the easiest way to get ideas is to try new tools. Try something you've never used in Blender before, or if you find like a free add-on or something that looks really cool, just experiment with it, because sometimes that experimentation can lead to interesting concepts or interesting ideas, and then you can make a series out of it and try more stuff. So it's got 2 advantages. You don't have to think about what you're doing, because you can just experiment, so you don't have to go in with a preconceived notion of what you want to do, and you get to learn some new tools, which is always a good thing. So it works for me. Somebody says, no, I missed 47 minutes already. Don't worry, the stream will be archived. You can watch it later. What is my suggestion for students? Which software could they learn, Maya or Blender, and why? Well, honestly, it's a case of what you want to do and what you're comfortable with. If you open up Blender and you're like, this isn't for me, then don't use Blender. The reason I would steer students towards Blender is because Maya has a subscription cost attached to it, which if you want to start working on it, you can use the student version, which is fine. But if you want to do commercial work, you're going to have to start paying every month, which is a little bit rough if you want to start freelancing, or if you want to, do stuff with it. But honestly, just learn whatever suits you, whatever you like. If you prefer Maya, then just use Maya. I don't really care. If you're going to go into a studio and you know the studio, like if you're trying to get an internship at a studio or multiple studios, and they use like Autodesk stuff like Max and Maya, then it might be more interesting to learn Max and Maya. If you want to do your own thing, if you want to freelance, and you want to save some money, just learn Blender. It really doesn't matter. I use Blender. I came from 3ds Max because I used to work in a studio that used it, and I made the switch because I was going freelance and I didn't feel like paying, like 150 or 200 euros a month for 3ds Max. So I started looking at alternatives, and I ended up with Blender. That's pretty much it. So yeah, like I see a lot of people talking about ideas, but it's like there's no good or bad ideas. There's this stuff that happens. Like I said, just try things, and if you find something cool, then just roll with it. see what happens. All right, so let's build a second glitcher, which is going to be fairly similar. So I'm going to duplicate a displace over here, and I just want it to glitch the image. And again, I can duplicate this setup, maybe even that one, and plug it into the X value. Now, because this is this texture is similar, like it's got the same offset and scale, you can just mess with the offset, for example. And I want this to be even more squashed down. So there we go, and maybe even exaggerate that. So it's easy to reuse some of this stuff, and then add a little bit more blur. Now you can really see what that blur does. It sort of adds this distortion effect to it because the edges become softer. Maybe not too much, something like that. But I want them to be even smaller. I just want them to be like single lines. And I think I'm scaling on the wrong axis. Yeah, it looks like I'm scaling on the wrong axis. No, keep hitting the offset. There we go. And I think it's the y-axis I need to, yeah. There we go. Now we're getting sort of more interesting patterns. Again, going into this, it's just a case of bringing this back up. And you can do stuff like use easing, so there's more difference in between them. And I don't really like these lines that I have going on. So and let's offset it a little bit. Set this to 0. There we go. That should be all right. That's nice. The only thing is it's only glitching in one direction. So if we want to have this in both directions, we can either copy this, and again, like we did here with the -1 multiply. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the whole thing because I want to have a different pattern going the other direction. So let's plug this in here, plug this in here. There we go, and just change the value. And because it's in the same place and it's the same texture, you're actually negating it, which is interesting. But if I were to offset this differently now, then we get a different pattern. So that's looking pretty cool. Maybe it's a bit too much still. I'm gonna bring these in. Okay. So I really want to degrade the image a bit more. Let's see what we can do. I'm gonna add in some grain as well. Mix, and I found that lighten works okay on a dark background, even though with Filmic Blender and compositing the way it is, you shouldn't use some of the older methods, but if it works, it works. I don't really care about, like, people talk a lot about technical stuff, and it's really good to know the technical stuff. I would say it's even important, because when you know it, you know why you're breaking it, and you know how you're breaking it to achieve certain things. So maybe I want to even lighten this up a little bit. There we go. Just degrade it. You can see we have some glitching going on at the side here from the other shaders, from the displacement. So let's see. Sort of want to get rid of that. So let's use a very cheap trick. After the glitches, you can see how the node tree can get a bit bigger. I'm not really organizing it, but you could add frames and groups and all that kind of thing. So let's see. I'm going to create a new matte. I'm going to create a box mask. And again, this is just a very cheap trick, but if it works, it works. You know, I'm not too worried about it. So setting this to multiply, we're going to make sure that we have the whole letter set up, the whole thing. So now what the box mask is doing is just multiplying that in, and I need to make sure. What's my mask looking like? That should work. Ah, there we go. Oh no. What in the? Oh, it's an alpha. Never mind. If we turn off use alpha, there we go. Didn't see that before. So there shouldn't be any, reason to use that. There we go. All right, so time to ask him some more questions first. You've seen the new things coming to 2.8. What just caught your eye? So much stuff, really. I'm very excited about the collections in a very nerdy way. I think they're really going to change the way we think about render passes and how to manage them. It's poised to be a really interesting system, being able to sort of grab certain properties of certain, I don't know, objects or whatever, shaders or whatever you want to do, and then be able to set something separate for each render pass. It's definitely very exciting. I don't have screen keys installed at the moment. I think I used it for the nope. I used it for the 3D view. Unfortunately, I don't have it installed for like an overlay. Sorry. Did I do that with the text tool in Blender or made it out of polygons? No, I did it with the text tool. Once the stream is up, you can have a look at how I did it. Do you have both direction offset of the values by adding in a subtract node after the multiply? I don't really know what you mean by it. You could probably do it in one node, but if it works, it works. As the ultimate motto under it says. Do I think I'll use Eevee for motion graphics? For sure. I've got a feeling that 4K is sort of upon us soon enough. I haven't had any clients ask for it specifically so far, but I'm sure it will start coming pretty soon. So now I'm actually going to work on the image itself. So I've got the glitches all set up. And actually what I'm going to do is, let's see, grab all this stuff and mute it, so I just have the image so I can work on that more easily. And I can turn those back on later. Ooh. So let me grab the mist. Oh man. If only the node wrangler worked for the compositor view. It works for a viewer, but not for the compositor, unfortunately. So I'm going to color ramp this in, and now you can see, because the mist, because I set it up properly, I can get a nice sort of black and white gradient towards the back. Sometimes I like to take out the back of the scene a little bit, just darken it down. We'll see how much of an effect it has and if it's even worth it. Color mix. Multiply and plug these back in. So now we can see it happen live. Okay, so it's taken away a lot of our cool glitchy stuff. So it doesn't really seem useful in this case. There we go, that's fine. All right, time to add some glows. The glare filter is awesome, just in case you didn't know. So I usually set it up like this nowadays, where you have it separately. So I'll show you really quick what it does and why I'm doing that. So the glare node in Blender is really cool. It's actually got a really nice fall off. And let me plug in the image here. So if you just put it on there, it works fine. But generally what I'll do is set the mix to 1, so you only have the glare, and that way you can composite it in separately, and it gives you just a little bit more control, and you can do stuff to it separately if you want to. So for example, now have a factor that I can mix it in and out more easily with. So I like that glariness in the middle there. Looks cool. But the fun thing is, what we can do is now mess with the hue, for example. Because we're going for this really colorful thing. There we go. Add some blue into it. That actually looked pretty cool. Let's see what happens when we add red into it. Not quite as much. Yellow's okay, but I don't know, I like the blue. Yeah, that really adds to it. Got a little arc reactor feel going on there. Maybe bring down the threshold, see what happens if we add more glare. It's a little much, but maybe turn down the size. No, the size was good. There we go. Any more questions? What do I do? What's the channel about? Well, I make crazy crap in Blender and then I stream it and make tutorials. I do a lot of motion graphics related work, that type of thing. Really all kinds of stuff, honestly. Yeah, I don't know. I'm using Blender in a lot of ways it's not supposed to be used. Just adding a little bit here. And the curves node is your best friend for trying to get more from it. What happens if we take away the green? It becomes a little more glitchy. Maybe add in some blue. Let's see what we do when we add saturation. Now the saturation in the Blender Compositor doesn't really work properly. It does some weird things to the highlights and the colors, but in this case it might work out because it's a really kind of crazy over the top thing. I want to add in some more color, but that is turned way too green. So if I turn it off, you can see it really messes with it. So the green, how come that's so green all of a sudden? So Chris says, glare is something I feel can be done right and turns out really well if done so. Yeah, so glows and glares are essential to a lot of CG stuff, especially if you're working with light and things that sort of light up. So what I'm noticing is that I've got a lot of light going on here in the middle, but over here and down here, not quite as much. So I think I might tweak the 3D scene a little bit and bring these back just a little bit. Slide this out a little bit more. So bring down the count and maybe even add just an extra little light here. It's an area light that can maybe brighten that up a little bit. So I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now the cool thing is if you use Alt-D to copy them over, then these values are actually linked, which is really handy. Minus 90, there we go. Now let's have a look at the result first. And this will probably be fairly slow again, but ooh. Come on, it's taking ages to start rendering. So this is already a lot more interesting because we're getting a lot more colors here, and actually decreasing this seemed like a good idea. So we're gonna go back. Nice. So that's looking pretty cool. Now, I don't feel like these are doing a lot, so we might have to, no. Undo always takes forever. So I'm going to reset the rotation and angle them towards the camera, because remember, reflections, the way they work is the angle you go in on a reflective surface, it's the same angle over on the other side. So come on. Undo takes forever. There we go. And so you can see that it's having some effect, but it's not quite doing what I want it to do. So I'm gonna rotate it on the x-axis now. And you'll see the moment I start moving this back, it'll actually have way more effect. So we can sort of model the light from here. And I'm gonna do the same thing to this guy. And even if it's not in the same place or it's not symmetrical, it doesn't really matter. So, no, on the x-axis, sorry. GY, move it back. And this one, for example, we might want to move over to here. And now you can see there's a lot better distribution of light and reflections going on. And maybe I can move this one even back a little bit more to get it a little bit more random. There we go. And I think this produces a better result anyway. So, okay, I think we're almost there. I'm not gonna overdo it on this one. Again, these are more meant as a fun thing you do rather than trying to make an incredible art piece out of each one, because I've got to do 36, so if I spend 24 hours on each one, then it'll be impossible to actually work. Undo does work a little bit faster if I'm out of a rendered viewport, that's true. I just like my rendered viewport. And actually something I forgot about, I can maybe try and tint the lights as I did with the other light. So MG says, this is very cool, very different from what I've seen in Blender. Thank you very much. And what is my PC setup? So I get this question every time. I built a very beefy machine recently. I'm running a Threadripper 16-core CPU with 64 gigs of RAM because the RAM was just insanely expensive when I built it. And there's 4 NVIDIA GPUs in it, a Titan X, and 3 1080 Ti's. So I built this machine specifically for GPU rendering. And yeah, I mean, using Blender allowed me to do that, honestly. Having no cost for my 3D application is kind of crazy. But I'm using 3 GPUs to render right now. I generally only use the display GPU to render when I go to bed and I'm not doing other stuff on my computer. It really depends on the situation. And especially now with the 2.79 daily builds, you can use the CPU as well, and it speeds it up even more. Although it's very situational. It's not a one-click fix for every scene, I'll admit. Some scenes is still faster just with the GPUs, some scenes are faster with the CPUs. Generally, I found that if the scene's really complex, yeah, then adding in the CPU really helps. If it's a simple scene where it just needs to rip through some very basic shaders, then the GPU is faster. So, all right. So I made this single user now because I want to start tweaking the color of the lights separately. So you can already see if I change this to blue, it gives us a more interesting effect. So I really like that. I'm going to hang on to that. And I think this one's still blue as well. So I'm going to have to, oh no, it's not. Let's see, what if we go with green over on this side? Or even red. There's not really a lot of red in the scene right now. So that gives a nice balance. And I think I might add another one up top. Did I overclock the CPU? No, I didn't. I really like silent PC cases, and there's already a lot of heat being output, so overclocking the CPU wouldn't be the best idea to add on to it. The GPUs though, are, at least the 1080 Ti's, are water cooled, so they're just like all-in-one water cooled. It's not like a custom loop or anything. So they run at just insane speeds. They're like really high overclocked all the time, which is nice. So you can see I'm really painting with the reflections and really adding to the scene. So any of the colors that I was still missing, I can add in easily. Really like sort of the blue and purple going on up here. So now I've got sort of a blue greenish corner, a red corner, and a blue purple corner. And you can already see if we go back to the render, we didn't have a full render anymore. You can already see, you know, it's a very iterative process. Like the one on the right here, even though it's only half rendered, it looked pretty cool, but I felt like it was still lacking that idea of sort of the prism and the broken up stuff. And we need to not trying to be conversational or anything, but Maya is better. Depends on what you do. If you think Maya is better, then you should use Maya. It really doesn't matter. I tried Maya way back when I started doing CG, and this is a long time ago. This is when I was like 16, so that's 16 years ago. And I remember opening it, looking at the UI, and just saying, no, this doesn't look like a lot of fun to use, or it looks too complex, and actually put me off CG for quite some time. So there's a funny little anecdote. But you know, Maya's good. I feel like Maya's really good in big pipelines and big studios because it's quite flexible, but honestly any program will do most of the stuff that you need to do. For high-end production, wouldn't it be cheaper just to use a render farm? You know, I render everything myself because the overhead of sending stuff to a render farm and downloading all of the EXRs and then compositing them separately and all that kind of stuff is just, for me, it's a pain in the butt. The flexibility that this way gives me is that I can do everything myself. I have control over everything, and I have a second computer with 2 GPUs in it as well to offload renders to as well. And I found that a lot of the render farms, if I send my scenes, they just completely crash or freak out because of the way I do things. And at least I know if it works on my computer and it renders on my computer, I can just go hard on it. It depends on how big your cache is. If you have sims or rigid. I think that's for the render farm, but yeah, rendering sims and stuff on an online render farm, no thanks. Like my internet is pretty quick, but it's still just a pain in the ass. Everything. Maya is better at everything. If the UI scares you, you go step by step. Dude, if you like Maya so much, just use Maya. It's fine. It doesn't matter. There's no need to start shouting in here that it's better. It's what you prefer. One isn't better than the other. And compositor, go. I like Blender because it gives me everything I need within the application. There we go. So now because we've set up our compositor, you immediately see a lot more of the light sources lighting up and glowing. This has got a really cool sort of interesting look to it now. I'm not convinced that the grain is adding. It looks a little bit crappy. So we can see what we can do about that. All right, so this is a very useful mind. Well, look, everybody's got an opinion. I'm not too worried about, you know, if you like Maya, just use Maya. It's fine. It doesn't matter at all what you use. It's the art that counts at the end of the day. So cool. In the wise words of the dude, for the people that have seen, wow, I can't think of the name now, The Big Lebowski. Well, that's just like your opinion, man, and that's fine. So we're almost there. I feel like this project is almost done. Where's my shortcuts? There we go. So I'm still not happy with the way the grain looks here, because it looks like ass. Maybe make it a little bit softer. That's better. And then maybe bring the factor down just a touch. Has to be there to add to the atmosphere. I think that's better. That's nice. All right, cool. I think I'm actually gonna call this one finished. I'm very happy with how it turned out. It's kind of nutty, but it works. So let's see if there's too much. There's still a little bit of noise. So generally, especially for projects like this, I'll add in another filter node. So I love the filter. It makes me laugh every time. So what the soften does is it just sort of softens your edges. And I'll turn this off. And it does blur your image just a little bit, but if you use it just ever so slightly, then what it can do is just get rid of that noise a little bit. Like it feels more like film noise or film grain, and especially because we're going for like this glitched look, just taking the edges, the hard edges off everything can really sell the effect. So that's nice. I think I might render it at some slightly higher passes. All right, so, and while this is rendering, I'll answer some questions and I'll show the 3 other ones I've done so far and one last piece of art, and then I think that's it for this live stream. So, is there any benefit to saving as an EXR compared to other formats? Yes, so much. So if you're going to do compositing on it, the EXR basically saves out your pixels that are overly bright, for example. So I'm going to try and explain this. See what we can do. What's the best way to explain this? If I go in, I'll start a second Blender session real quick. Or no, actually I'm just going to explain it without showing it because it's going to take forever otherwise. So what EXR does is, the difference between EXR and something like a PNG or a TIFF or a JPEG or whatever, is that all the pixels that you see here, for example, that I'm rendering, a lot of them are brighter than white. But the moment you save it to a PNG, it's just going to turn out white. So it's going to be RGB value 255, 255, 255. And the problem with that is if you want to do external compositing with it, it's going to be a pain in the butt, because if you drag down the exposure, what's going to happen is that white is just going to turn gray and you lose a lot of the information that you rendered out. Now, render engines are created in a way that, you know, there's brightness going over white all over the place. And if you save it to an EXR, you can do the test yourself, and there's plenty of stuff online to show you that as well. If you do the test yourself, what you can do is render out a PNG and then render out an EXR. Bring it into Blender or Natron or Fusion or Nuke or whatever your compositor is, or After Effects. Throw on an exposure. Thing with After Effects, so if you have to make sure you're in 32-bit mode, which is really important. And bring down the exposure on both images. What you'll see happening is that the low dynamic range image, so the PNG, JPEG, etc., will start turning gray, and the EXR will actually become darker, but all of the stuff that was white and that was overly bright will slowly become darker, and you'll still see all the detail in it, all the colors, even though the rest will get darker as well. So it's sort of like taking a picture with a camera. I think somebody even said that. Yeah, it's kind of like raw footage. So if you take a picture on a DSLR, the difference between a JPEG and a RAW is that you can edit it way more. And if you're going to do some serious color correction to it, always try to use an EXR, because it's just better. That's what it's made for. It was created by big Hollywood studios to be able to fit into compositors and do cool stuff with. So for me, I work a little bit differently. If I know I'm going to be compositing, I'll render everything to an EXR and then use an external compositor. But if I'm doing projects like this, and even some commercial projects, smaller stuff, then I'll save it to a PNG because I've already done my compositing in Blender after the fact. So there we go. So this is A, and I've got this little renders folder, and I'm going to call it A. Let's see, make sure I'm set to PNG, RGB is fine, and call this A. So that's that done. That was actually pretty quick. I think it took a little bit longer on the other ones, but I'll show you real quick what I have lined up so far. You get a sneak preview. 36 days of type. No, going to the renders. So we just did the A, then, no, why is it opening in DJV? So that's the A, that's the B, which is kind of fun. I was playing around with hair particles. You can do some cool stuff with them. Then the C is interesting because this is what I meant by with the vector displacement, is you can see how the displacement sort of folds over onto each other. Works really, really well. You can do some really complex effects with it very quickly. It looks really cool. And then the D is similar to what I was doing now with the vertex, what's it called? Can't think of the modifier now. Which one am I talking about? So the vertex weight edit modifier, but in this case, what I actually did is layer a bunch on top. So I have a big sort of grid, and these are all the cell, was it cell noise? I keep forgetting the name. Anyway, this is a really big one taking out bigger chunks, and then a second one on top of that taking out smaller chunks, and a third one on top of that taking out even smaller chunks. And then just shading it and using the ocean modifier on a plane behind it just to make it a little bit more interesting. So yeah, having a pretty colorful start to the series, but I'm very happy with how this turned out. Let's have a look at some more questions. Yes, I use Linux. I said that earlier even. So yeah, I'm using Ubuntu 17.10. Save every layer of your art, multiple EXRs, and composite in Nuke. Yeah, but only if you have to. See, there's this weird thing where people are going over the top to do stuff that maybe isn't necessary. Like, what do I mean by that? Yes, a multi-layer EXR with all these render passes and things is great if you're going to do hardcore compositing and comping into CG footage and doing all that kind of things. But really, if you're just doing simple projects or your own projects and you're doing some basic color correction, then the time you're going to spend setting up the EXRs and the layers in Nuke or whatever, or Blender, it doesn't matter. It's really a sort of time versus benefit sort of thing. I used to do it as well, and then I stepped away from it because if it isn't necessary, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of hard drive space because the EXRs become absolutely massive. But it works. If you want to do really complex compositing, then sure, it's definitely a good workflow. Then all right, so thank you for that, for all the comments. What is the name of the software that I'm using for opening the images? Well, actually, there were two in here. So the one I'm using now is called Gthumb. It's part of the Linux ecosystem. You can install it. And the other one is called DJView. And if you don't know this one's awesome. It's used for using image sequences, which is really handy because you can, you can load in like a PNG or an EXR sequence and preview it and play it at different frame rates. So that's an unmissable tool in any CG artist's or animator's toolkit, I think. All right, so for the last little thing, I'm gonna break down a little project I did recently, and I don't know if it's in here. No, I'm gonna have to open it. It has a weird name in here, but don't worry about it. And let me open the render real quick as well. So a little inside joke, this the folder of this project was called Ogres because I was going to try layer stuff because ogres have layers, which is incidentally one of my favorite all-time animated movies. All right, so the thing I'm going to break down really quickly is this render I did recently, and I think you can see from the pattern that you're seeing in here that it's actually very similar to how I worked on the A today. So let's have a look. So I'm going to start from the beginning and just run over it. So this is the final shape, so keep that in mind when I'm working on stuff. So I just need to know, what's it called? Plane 000. All right, so let's start with plane 1. So I started with a plane, which was subsurfed, and I don't know, where are all my, oh, there they go. So here's a bunch of modifiers on it. So what I had to do for this one, because I was layering the vertex weight, and you'll see, so first I'll array it, and I'm warning you, this is going to get real slow. So if you're bored, I'm sorry. So I'm doing the trick with the vertex weight and the distorted noise in it, except this time I just layered it. So this is the first set, and again, it's incredibly slow. There we go. This is the first layer of detail. You can see there's already a lot going on. And then I'll add in the second one, but it's going to take a really long time. All right, so there's a second layer, and you can see it slowly, and I'm just gonna overdo the ambient occlusion a little bit so you can see what's going on. So you can see there's a second layer added in, and I wish I could switch back and forth between these quickly, but unfortunately it's just crazy slow. All right, well, to the guy who's all about the 32-bit, having a 32-bit EXR workflow, do your thing, but stop giving people shit about it. There's really no point, you know. If you're working in that kind of environment and you need it, go for it. But honestly, for about 50% of the cases that you're doing stuff, it really doesn't matter. The only things that actually need to be 32-bit are things like world position passes, motion vector passes, but for most of the color passes, for example, and normal render passes, there's really no point in having them 32-bit. I've yet to read or come across a case where it's absolutely necessary. So, and I mean, maybe it's best that we just agree to disagree, because just shouting in the chat isn't really going to do anything. All right, so now with that third layer of detail, we can see it's getting completely nuts. So this is what I started out with. And again, it's just a plane. And if I, when I showed you guys the letter D as well, I basically cut it out with a Boolean. So similar workflow. So now let's go back, and I'm going to turn all of these off again. It's going to take forever probably. I've noticed that layering these vertex weight edits is really, really heavy on Blender. So I don't know what's going on there, because really all you're just doing is assigning vertex groups with a texture, but oh well. So then what I ended up doing is collapsing it down to just a single mesh object to keep it a little bit faster. Oh crap, shouldn't have turned on the screw because it messes everything up. Come on. All right. And then I think I just scaled it and did some stuff to it and added in an empty to control the simple deform. So with it selected, I can't select it here. You can see I twisted it at an angle, and then I bent it at an angle and then twisted it. So that way you're getting these really interesting looking shapes. And then finally, I just collapse that down as well. And then the final eye that you can see is just a lattice. So if you build a lattice in Blender, you can find it here. There you go. What you can do is, for example, if I were to take some of these points, you can actually deform it. So this sort of, I just wanted to do something like really techie or whatever by layering things. So I don't know how quick this is going to be because it's a high res mesh, but there you go. You can deform it, free deform it, which is really cool. But it's not really doing much. Yeah, it's a little on the slow side. I don't know. Oh, there we go. So then when I started seeing that round shape, I was just messing with it, displacing it, like trying stuff with it, doing generally weird things to it. And once I got to the round shape, I figured, hey, that could be something like an iris. And I used the lattice to give it more of sort of an indent in the middle and push it out towards the edges. And you can see that if I turn it off and on. So this is the flat version, and this is the latticed version. And then what I ended up doing on top of that is, I believe, because this is the final one, I I don't know if I did anything else to it. Yeah, so I collapsed it down again and added a adaptive subsurf, so I can do subdivision or micro displacement as well. And we'll have a quick look at the shader. So one more thing that I forgot to mention is there's a round cube here. Which is sort of like an eyeball. So I wanted sort of a glassy layer in front of it to make it, to deform it just that little bit to make it look really like an eye or an iris. But that's the sort of the final wireframe for that, I guess. And then looking at the, this is the compositor, I think. I don't know. And then just looking at the image, sorry, not the image, the shader. I grabbed an image texture of an iris, just projected it onto that. So let's see if I can find it. Texture, iris, diffuse. So I grabbed it from Pixabay. There was one with like 2 and just overlaid them a little bit. And because it's all broken up and distorted, it doesn't really have to be perfect. It works just fine. And I used that to just drive a very basic diffuse shader. There's really nothing else going on. I'm not even using these. So it's just a diffuse shader. And I added in displacement as well. So I don't know how visible that is on the final image. I have a really large version, which might be better to show. So if I zoom into it here, I don't know why it's freaking out. Let's see if I open it with GThelp, might be better. Full screen, set to actual size. So this is the final render size as well. And you can see how they're sort of cusping a little bit. So that's what I use the displacement for, to give them that little bit of, yeah, just that. You don't really see it all that much when you're looking at the image, but it feels just that little bit displaced. So again, I just plug the same texture into it, and it works quite well because you see the strands a little bit more because the geometry is actually being displaced as well. And other than that, let's see, yeah, there's a few lights in here, just some point lights that colorize the middle a little bit. Like if you look at the, if you look here, these are point lights. There's a point light here colorizing that a little bit. And there's a really giant plane with a gradient on it, just reflecting off of that sort of glassy surface in front of the eye, just to give it a little bit more color. So this could be very easily done in compositing as well. I don't know if there's much of a advantage to doing it in camera, if you want to call it that, but it looked cool, so I figured I'd just roll with it. And it was pretty cool because as I was rendering this at 6K, so this is a print version that's slightly upscaled. So it's 6400 by 6400, and the cool thing is with the new CPU plus GPU option, I rendered it on the 4 GPUs plus the CPU, and this took me at 6.5K about an hour and a half to render. So that's pretty amazing for an image like this. Granted, there's not really much going on shader-wise. There's no volumes, there's no subsurface scattering. There's very little reflection going on because it's actually just a diffuse shader. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I've got a little version for the web that I can set up that if you want to just hit me up on Twitter or whatever, and I'll post the link to it. I'll throw it online, and you can have a look at it yourself and do whatever you want with it. So I think that's pretty much it for now. I'm just gonna have a quick look through the questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So would I be able to explain how I've done some of the fracture animations? The first one is just all about prism shader. Actually, I'll show it to you real quick on the Blender Market. I don't know where that tab opened. There we go. Otherwise, I'd happily share the files, but because I use this, I don't want to share, obviously, something that's for sale. I think it's in glass. I'll just search for it, probably be quicker. So this is a really cool shader. It's only like $7, but it can do some amazing things. And I'll actually have to be honest with you. I'll have to have a look through the first one. I can open the files really quickly. Is there an MP4 in here? Yeah. So this one, all this is displaced geometry with that prism shader. So let me open that real quick. Daily builds. So this is some arraying and other things going on, but honestly, there we go. So I'm just going to turn them off real quick. So the array wasn't on, need to remember that, otherwise it's going to get slow. So first I solidify it to get 2 sides, then subsurf it just to get more polygons, then I'll displace it, and this is sort of where all the magic happens, I guess. And to get a perfect loop, generally what I'll do is I'll mirror it, so then that way halfway through the image, that's how you get sort of that converging look as well. And for the displacement, by the way, I just used a Voronoi texture set to Manhattan. It makes some really cool shapes. And then it's just a case of smoothing out the edges a little bit and then adding the prism shader onto it. So there you go. That's all it is. All the shading on that thing is just a prism shader. So let's see. I'm gonna speed through these a little bit because I really need to pee. That one didn't pan out. That one didn't pan out. 4 is which one? Oh yeah, this one is cool. So this is one I did as well. Now this one is also a add-on from the Blender Market, but I should be able to share the result because you don't need to add on to load the file. It just generates it for you. So that's what I meant earlier as well by trying new tools. Obviously I'm showing paid add-ons here, but if you can find free ones, then, you know, like I said, some ideas just come from add-ons. So I use the Fractal Explorer for this one, and what it allows you to do is basically build structures like these. So you build one structure, and then you build a second structure, and then it will sort of add it fractally onto the other ones, and they're all linked together. So if you for example, bend like one in the beginning, then the other one will bend with it, and it sort of all works out really nicely. So I'll show you the scene very quickly. Open, I think it was 4. So here you see the scene, and this is the base shape, and you can see it's all these instances, and the Fractal add-on did it for me. So that's a cool thing. And then you'll see, for example, because they're all linked together, if I'm going to rotate this one, they all rotate together. And really all I did is just rotate them and animate them, and then added some crazy shading on top of it. I'm sorry if it's a quick breakdown, but yeah, we're already almost 2 hours in, and I want to keep it, you know, I want to start wrapping up a little bit. I've got some family stuff to attend to later. Now, let's see, for some last things. Control's good if you need it. Still talking about EXRs, it seems. How have I projected the image without UV unwrapping? Actually, I did unwrapping, but I did it in like the most janky way ever. So I generally not a big fan of unwrapping. It takes a long time, but you can get a really quick unwrap very quickly. So imagine that this is the eye model, because I'm not going to do it on the other one. It's going to take forever. What I'll do is line up my view to it, and then just hit project from view bounds, and then what that does is it gives you it's just a very straight projected UV. So even if this would have layers, so let me array this really quickly. There we go, and I'll add just a bunch of layers to it, and then I'm going to apply everything. So we have this as an object. Even if I do it like this, you might notice that my view switches to orthographic once I use like a front side or whatever view. It's an option you can set in the user preferences. But from an orthographic view, what I'll do is I'll just hit U, project from view bounds, and then if we look at the actual UVs, you'll see that all the layers are on top of each other, and it's just projecting the UV straight on top of all the layers. If you just want a basic frontal projection, it's the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get, if you just unwrap it, then you get this, and they're all slanted, and trying to get that to work kind of sucks. So I use very basic UVs if I use UVs at all. So. a lot of the stuff I do is procedural. That's true. Procedural textures are computer generated textures, but the main thing about them is that they don't have bounds, so they project perfectly all the way around on your object, and they're seamless, which is really cool, and you can animate them and all kind of stuff. Paid isn't really a spooky word for Blender users, but once you start using Blender more and more, I found that you become a lot more skeptical towards paid stuff. For example, do some add-ons really need to cost 250 euros, or do some texture packs really need to cost 100 bucks? That's sort of what you start wondering. And I had issues in the past with both After Effects and 3ds Max, where you buy plugins that are essential to your workflow, and at one point either the company goes under, or they decide to start charging way more, or the compatibility isn't what it used to be. And for me, everything, a lot of the smaller things that I paid for in 3ds Max, stuff like quad cap, a lot of modeling stuff, when I started using Blender, it was all in there. And if it wasn't, then somebody had found a way to either do it in Blender or wrote a little add-on for free that does it. So I think the sense of community in Blender is a lot stronger because of it. But yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is. To each their own, I guess. So, I think you can do fractal with a tissue modifier. Probably. I think there's something fractal in there, but I don't really use the tissue modifier all that much. I should really get into it. The material for the fractal loop thing. All right, but that's the last thing I do. After that, I really need to go. So let's have a look. Open projects. I really need to clean some of this stuff up. All right, so let me just grab this and this. Where are they? Why am I not able to select them? Oh, this one is invisible, I think. No. Ah, there we go. Yeah, I was using group instances. So let's have a look. I'll just keep this selected, and then you can have a look at what's going on. So I started with, let's see, this is the base shader. It's got some transmission to it. So it's actually a transmissive shader, so it's a glass shader, and by using the volume absorption in the volume, it's not just see-through, but it actually becomes sort of a purpley kind of shader. Then just by using a wave texture, and this is actually a cool trick, if you want the, because this is all the same object, if I was to use object in here, for example, input texture coordinate, if I use object, then what's going to happen is it's going to use the same distribution on every object, because they're just all the same objects, and they even though they're scaled, it'll wrap it around the same, and it looks kind of weird. And because they're all instances, and I wanted to project the texture over all of the objects at the same time and have sort of a more I guess concrete feel to it, you can use the position, because then what it does is it ignores the individual objects and just looks at the shader or the procedural texture in the world position. And then having animated that, you can see it sort of moves around, which gave it the look I wanted it to be. And then using a color ramp, what I'm doing is mixing in a second shader, which is, I can't remember what it was, just a regular shader. It actually has some subsurface in it. And you've got random walk subsurface shading, which is a lot faster now in the daily builds. So you can actually render animations with it a lot easier. And then I use a second color ramp just on the other end to give it some emission. And because I'm using and subsurface shaders and sort of glassy shaders and things, we get light sort of melting into the whole thing, and it makes it look pretty cool. So again, nothing overly complex, but some cool, interesting small tricks. And yeah, I know I said that's the last thing for the 10th time, but now this actually is it. So okay, I think that's it for me. We're hitting close to the 2-hour mark. So thanks everybody for joining once again, and yeah, I had a good time. I'm glad I made an A. I didn't know how this was gonna go, so it was an overall positive experience. And I guess I'll see you guys either next time or yeah, I'll try and stream more letters. I'm not going to commit to any specific ones yet because it really depends on my schedule. But if I can, I will, and I'll try and give everybody a bit of a heads up before. So thank you all for joining. Have a great Easter afternoon, or April Fool's Day, or whatever you're gonna do. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. See you later.